All right, now we're diving into one of the most transformative forces of our time, artificial intelligence. It's no longer a buzzword. Globally, AI is projected to become a $757 billion America market by 2025, creating 12 million jobs and reshaping industries, economies, and also geopolitics. So from supply chains to investment strategies, AI is rewriting the rules of competition, and governments are racing to strike the right balance between innovation and also ethics. Malaysia is seizing this moment with National AI Office or NAIO 2021 until 2025 roadmap and 5.9 billion ringgit in R&D investments across agriculture, healthcare and also education. But big questions remain. How do we harness AI to strengthen our economy, cultivate world-class talent and improve lives? The stakes are high. AI could add 530 billion ringgit to Malaysia's economy by 2030, yet it also raises questions about ethics, talent and also sovereignty. So joining us to unpack these issues is Nicholas Gordon, the editor at Fortune Asia. Good morning, Nicholas.
Good morning. Good morning. It's great to be here.
Amazing. So AI is projected to contribute over 15 trillion US dollars to the global economy by 2030. And we're seeing the US, China and also the EU harden their AI strategies, with China with state-led industrial policy and the EU with strict AI Act compliance. So from your vantage point, how is AI rewriting the rules of global competition, and where does Southeast Asia fit in this new hierarchy?
Well, AI is clearly kind of rewriting the rules of the game. It's probably one of the most strategic technologies to have emerged in the past kind of decade. The US is rushing ahead on this. China is rushing ahead on this. Other countries are trying to carve their own space in this technological arms race. And so it'll be very interesting to see where kind of other countries, other regions like Southeast Asia try to find their own place in the development to make better and more powerful AI models. One thing to pay attention to, I think, is the development of sovereign AI, this idea that of governments supporting local AI development and local AI capability to kind of ensure that they control the model and they control how the data is used. And that's an increasingly important policy prerogative in places like South Korea, in places like Thailand. Within Southeast Asia, you are seeing countries starting to develop their own AI strategy. Singapore kind of took the lead on this in 2019. They put forward their plan to be an AI nation. Malaysia as well is also pushing forward on this and kind of investing in the infrastructure behind AI, things like data centers, things like semiconductor manufacturing. But other countries in the region too, you're starting to see the early stages of them figuring out what their AI strategies will be.
But let's look at the context of Malaysia. Like I mentioned earlier, Malaysia's national roadmap 2021 until 2025 is 63% complete, and the government just announced 3.29 billion ringgit in AI investments for the first half of 2025 alone. So this is to aim at the raise tax GDP contribution from 23.5% to 25.5% by year end, and plus the National AI Action Plan 2026 until 2030 will expand governance and also ethics frameworks. So do these moves position Malaysia as a serious AI player, or are we still in catch-up mode compared to Singapore and also Indonesia?
I think it is perhaps still in catch-up mode, but it's probably further ahead than some of its peers. Malaysia, I think, has a great opportunity here in that it can kind of work with multiple players in the AI ecosystem. It can work with Western players, it can work with Chinese players, and be able to benefit from the advantages of both. It also has a great opportunity in terms of leveraging its existing advantages in terms of electricity, in terms of manufacturing, and again, kind of build the AI infrastructure that will support kind of this new technology. And also, the policymakers in Malaysia, I think, are thinking very carefully about the opportunities and the challenges that AI can bring. If you have a look at Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim's book released over the summer, he talks a lot about the opportunities and the challenges that may come from what he deems kind of the ungoverned expansion of AI. So I think Malaysian policymakers are thinking very carefully about not just the opportunities, but a way to kind of protect against some of the challenges and the risks that ungoverned expansion of AI might bring to a society.
But speaking of progress, in your opinion, where does Malaysia stand in the regional landscape, and how does actually different regulatory approaches impact AI competitiveness across Southeast Asia? Nicholas?
Well, as I said, I think we're still kind of in the early stages of this for a lot of countries in Southeast Asia. Again, Singapore has a plan, Malaysia has a plan, Thailand is investing in sovereign AI too, so kind of those I see are the countries that are maybe kind of helping to lead the way a little bit. But everyone, I think, is thinking about, again, how to integrate themselves into this new ecosystem, how to take advantage of the opportunities that may come into play, and how to tap the resources that are out there to really kind of build up AI capabilities locally, whether that's in terms of infrastructure, whether that's in terms of talent, whether that's in terms of support for startups, whether that's in terms of, again, working with other major partners around the world for AI. I think a lot of countries are thinking very carefully about this and, starting to move ahead on this, but it's still early stages, I think.
In your opinion as well, that we want to look at the trends because it's a dynamic landscape of AI, but what's the most significant AI-driven business trends that you are actually observing in the region? And what kind of AI-led innovation are you seeing from businesses in Malaysia specifically?
Well, it's hard to pick just one trend. There's kind of a lot of them. But one thing that's definitely on my mind right now is energy. Data centers require a lot of energy. You're getting comments out of places like the United States that it's tough to expand AI infrastructure because there's just not enough power out there to power the data centers that do all the inference and do all the training. I think that's going to be a very big question going forward throughout Southeast Asia, but also particularly in Malaysia, which does have some advantages when it comes to providing electricity. I'm also looking at kind of the spread of open source AI models, particularly from China. I think an undercovered story right now is the role that open source models like Alibaba's QN are playing in businesses around the region and around the world, not just in Southeast Asia. Airbnb CEO Brian Chesky came out the other day and admitted that his company is also using Alibaba's AI model in addition to other models as well. Then when it comes to businesses, I think there's a question of how you get more employees to adopt AI. Executives love it. Entry-level employees, I think, are very interested in this. They're using it themselves. But it's kind of middle managers, people who are actually having to put these plans into practice, that I think are still struggling a bit on how to adopt AI into their own processes without necessarily threatening their own jobs and their own work. So there's a lot of tricky things to balance here when it comes to businesses and how they think about AI. And, and we're going to be talking about all of these things at Fortune. We have several AI events throughout the year. We have Brainstorm AI in Singapore over the summer, and we're going to be discussing all of these issues in Malaysia next week at the Innovation Forum from November 17th to 18th, whether it's data centers and power, or how companies using AI, or open source versus closed source. These are all topics we're going to be covering next week on the 17th and 18th in Kuala Lumpur.
But in spite of the challenges that I mentioned earlier, talent is one of the most important things when it comes to AI. Speaking of which, Huawei has pledged to train 30,000 Malaysian AI professionals, and also Talent Corp launched the My Mahir National AI Council that is to align the skills with industry needs. Yet Cognizant wants the Malaysia race remaining an AI user rather than AI producer. So what structural changes, perhaps in terms of education, immigration, R&D incentives, that must Malaysia implement to avoid a brain drain and truly lead in AI innovation?
I do think talent's going to be a very big question going forward. It's whether to keep talent, how to retain talent, how to make sure that Malaysia has the talent it needs to, build and operate these AI models at home. And unfortunately, I don't quite have the answer in terms of what Malaysia's education strategy should be, but it would probably include a mix of kind of ensuring that there is an ecosystem that can keep talent at home, give them opportunities at home to work on, to build their own AI startups, to kind of develop their own models, to experiment with open source models and make it work in the Malaysian context. I also think that there's an opportunity here, again, to kind of build Malaysian AI for Malaysia. Again, this push towards sovereign AI, I think, is going to become a much bigger trend over the next few years as countries outside of the US and outside of China start to think about how they can make AI work better for them, work better for their people, and work better for their businesses.
So in terms of media, as an editor, Nicholas, how can media actually cover AI both ethically and also accurately at the same time? And what is Fortune doing in this space? How are you driving the AI conversation now?
Well, I think when it comes to covering AI accurately, it's a business like any other. So you don't necessarily have to think about covering it in some in some specific special way. It's a new technology. It's very exciting, but it's a business like any other. There's a potential for massive social and economic change thanks to AI, and it'd be wrong for reporters and media outlets to ignore that. But there's also a lot of hype in the industry. Developers often talk about how scared they are of what they've created, which can maybe be a roundabout way of talking about how powerful their product is. So it's worth being sober-minded about this too. So I guess for people who are thinking about AI, studying AI, talking about AI, one shouldn't ignore the possibility of kind of pretty big social and economic change and the disruptions that might come from that. But they should also be wary of hyping it up too much, of thinking that it's going to really kind of radically transform everything that we do. Some of these existential risks people talk about. It's worth being a little bit, I think, sober-minded about what this technology is. So it's an interesting space. It's kind of a difficult needle to thread, but we in the media, I think, have a lot of work to do and can do a lot in illuminating this for people. And as I mentioned, us at Fortune, we cover AI consistently throughout the year. We're covering all the big players, whether that's OpenAI or Anthropic, through to writing about DeepSeek and Alibaba. We're writing about Singapore and Malaysia's work in AI. We cover that pretty consistently. And we convene several events where we bring together experts in AI, both in terms of developers, large businesses, researchers, and have them discuss kind of all of these issues, the opportunities that AI brings, and how to maybe have guardrails against some of the risks that might emerge.
I totally understand where you're coming from, Nicholas, because no matter how fast we're moving, AI somehow always moves faster. But looking ahead to 2026 to 2027, what story about Southeast Asia and AI that do you think will be most important? Are there any exciting developments you have observed in Malaysia, especially when Malaysia is chairing ASEAN this year and spearheaded the ASEAN AI Safety Network to promote ethical innovation? So how do you see regional cooperation evolving? Will ASEAN harmonize AI standards, or will national interests dominate?
I think a place like Malaysia has the opportunity to actually maybe do both, again, is to kind of leverage its advantages to kind of make AI work for the country, to help Malaysia fit into this kind of global ecosystem for this new technology. But also, again, ASEAN is an asset for Malaysia. By working together, they have greater leverage and greater resources to develop these AI systems that work best for Southeast Asians. One question that will be on my mind going forward is, as AI becomes more efficient, as places like DeepSeek in China prove that you can have really powerful AI models without needing to spend lots and lots and lots of money on computer chips, whether or not those insights and those lessons make their way to more regional economies and local players, like ASEAN, and can the advantages that can be gleaned from training powerful models with fewer resources, whether other countries can take advantage of that and build powerful AI models for themselves, again, without needing to spend huge amounts of money on very expensive AI processors.
All right, that was Nicholas Gordon, the editor at Fortune Asia. And indeed, AI isn't just a technological revolution, it's a strategic one. And Malaysia's choices today will define its role in the global economy for decades. And you can find this whole discussion on all of our social media platforms. And thanks again, Nicholas. And for now, we'll have to go for a short break. Stay tuned for more updates after this with my colleague, Ibrahim Sani.